Our next presentation is an update on ESL from Mr. Kennedy.
Good evening, President Johnson, Dr. Wise, Mr. Garside, members of the board. Try to get everyone up to date as quickly as we can, just as far as the latest developments with our ELL program. We currently sit right now, our number of enrolled students at the beginning of this year, 3,348 students, puts us third in the state. We're back and forth with Cleveland and Cincinnati and Southwestern City Schools are all vying for that 2-3 spot right now. Columbus Public still being the largest, but overall percentage of students based on enrollment in the district, we're still the largest of the districts in the state of Ohio. But this year, just a couple of different wrinkles I want to make sure that we go over. Spanish is still our largest language group. 67% of our students right now currently enrolled speak Spanish, Somali, Arabic, 24%, and then it drops off as far as our students who speak Ukraine, Chin, which again is a language from the Republic of Myanmar, Burma, depending on political affiliations, it's been referred to both ways. But when we talk about the students in those different language groups, one of the things that we really want to keep in mind is our newcomer population right now, defined in two ways. The state defines a newcomer as a student who is either first year or second year in U.S. schools. Our first year, second year numbers, 33.8% of those 3,300 identified students we have are qualified as newcomers. But then the state, under the old Othella format, which we'll explain here in just a moment, if a student scored at a level 1 or a level 2 when it was a 1 to 5 continuum of English language proficiency, they were candidates to continue receiving SU grading as part of that whole newcomer piece. So if you look at the number of students that we have in our district who are scoring at that 1 or 2 level, we're approaching 50% of our students are still scoring at that 1 or 2 level. So that includes the 33.8% who are officially identified as newcomers, and then we have students third year, fourth year who are still on their way to English language proficiency who are scoring in that newcomer range. The way we used to do things in the state of Ohio, we took a test called Othella, and Othella was broken down into 5 different performance levels from pre-functional through proficient. The state in the past year has moved to a new assessment called OELPA. OELPA is now based on 3 performance levels. So students are emerging, they're progressing, or they're proficient. So this first year in shifting to OELPA, we didn't get 2016 results until November of this year. We've taken 2017 tests in February of this year. We should get those results back in May. But based on that assessment that came back in November, typically in our district, we would exit on average 321 kids per year with Othella testing. That was 13 to 14% of our population would exit on a yearly basis. The first year of OELPA, we exited 798 students. And it's not just something that's happening here in Southwestern, it's something that's happening in districts across the state of Ohio. But our immediate concern was we want to look, if we're going to talk about increasing those numbers by 2.5% or 2.5 times, what we would typically exit, we want to make sure that we know where those students are. So the first thing we did was we went back and we broke down those OELPA results if we were still using the Othella framework. And if we were still using the Othella framework, if you look at the top there, number 1, the state of Ohio said that we had 6.7% of our students were emerging. They were at that beginner level. If we go back and we use the same test results and we use the Othella framework for looking at it, we find that it's closer to 30% of our students who are either at the pre-functional or beginner level. Progressing, 1,700 students, 64% of our students are in that second category. If I talk with my staff, if I talk with folks in buildings in Othella terminology and I say you have a student who's a level 2 or a level 3 or a level 4, people know pretty much where those kids hit. With the OELPA format, if I say a kid's a level 2, that can mean anything from a student who got 1s on all 5 domains but got a 2 in one area, probably speaking or listening, or it could be a student who got 4s in every area and got 1-3 in reading or writing, those more cumbersome cognitive academic language areas. So for us, we felt like we really have to know who those 2s are, because we can't say to our staff, hey, your kid scored a 2 and know exactly where to schedule them or what to do. So if we broke that down, what we found was within that range of kids who scored in the 2 range, far more of those kids scored at a level what would have been a level 1 or 2 previously, and then there were a good number at the level 3 as well. But what we found was that big section in the middle, we still had a lot of kids with an awful lot of needs as far as their English proficiency levels was concerned, and that would bear itself out on the ELA test, which I'll go over here in a moment. If you look at that last category there, proficient students, again, close to 30% of our students, typically we exit 13%. So from 13 to 30% was a huge increase. We would like to say that it's because of all the hard work we do, and we know that we're right on track, which we do know that we're right on track with the things we're doing. But I said to my staff that I love them dearly, and we're not exiting 30% of the kids effective at this point in time. So we made sure that we looked at some other numbers to kind of verify that. So again, I'm not going to talk through all this. I'm just going to explain this, but I put it up here so that if you want to read it later, it'll make a little more sense. It's more of a narrative format. But really what we found was, of the 798 kids that the state said were proficient according to OELPA, 633 of those kids were at a grade level where they took an ELA, a corresponding ELA. Of the 633 kids who took the ELA who were proficient according to OELPA, less than 60% of those students were proficient on the ELA. So when we talk about the kids who were not proficient on the ELA but were proficient on OELPA, those students, their average score was in the limited range. These aren't kids who were scoring at the basic range and they were knocking on the door to be proficient. They were kids who scored in the limited range. So these are students who still need support based on every metric that we have. If we look at the Othella scores from previously, how we had done that, if we look at ELA scores, those were still students who still need help. If you go back to Othella days, when we were taking the OAA and the OGT, Othella was a very good predictor of success on OAA and OGT. We found that kids who scored at level 4, not even proficient, just kids who scored at the advanced level, between 70 to 75% of those kids were then proficient on OAA and OGT. This is the exact opposite. Our students who are proficient on OELPA, less than 40% of those students are then proficient on the ELA assessment. So there's work that needs to be done. There's work that needs to be done on our end, and there's work that needs to be done as far as working with the state to better understand the construction of the test, what do these early results say, those sort of things. So for me, the nice thing about it is I'm a member of the Ohio EL Advisory Committee. So as a member of the Ohio EL Advisory Committee, I've put this in front of the state straight away. I'm very concerned about scores and what the scores say, because we want to make sure we're doing best by our kids. And this is the area where it's a little concerning. The state is very specific in saying any student who is identified as an exited student, there's 2 things that we're not supposed to provide for those students as a district. Planned instruction by a qualified ESL teacher, that's a TESOL class, or adaptations and modifications in the delivery of content instruction, which goes hand in hand with the sheltered instruction model that we have up and running in the district. So the work that we're doing with the state, the work that I'm trying to make sure that we put in front of the state as a member of the advisory committee is, we have students who still have needs. Because the first year we took OELPA, it said a lot of kids exited, doesn't remove the fact that those are still students with an awful lot of needs. So we're working through that with the state. The state says, and I agree with them, it's 1 year of the assessment. We need to see, what do the numbers bear out year after year, but we know that early on there are concerns that we're definitely addressing. So what we have to try to do is we have to try to figure out what do we do to try to make sure that we are able to provide services. I've been working with Brad Faust. We've been working with the curriculum department, the personnel department. And what we're doing right now is we're looking at how do we take the existing staff that we have and how do we build supports in place for our students that if they aren't TESOL classes per se they're in, how are we still providing support in English language arts? How are we still providing that literacy support? So that's the work that our department is doing right now. We're making sure that we keep the supports in place for our students that they need in place. On a positive note, one of the things that I would say, and again, I think that the whole OELPA thing, we're going to be fine with that. It's just, we've got to work through the process on it, but don't want you to think that that's all negative. But in a definitely positive direction, we spoke last year about the beginnings of this medical interpreter program, a partnership that we have joined into the Ohio State University with. That program has been a very, very successful program. We intended to start the medical interpreter program this coming year, but we had 6 juniors. We had 9 juniors who had applied to be a part of the program, and what we didn't want to happen was, so sorry, it's not in place right now. You were this close, but you missed the opportunity. Ohio State really rolled their sleeves up. They did some work with us. The curriculum department did a lot of work. Again, Brad was great in helping us to get this up and running. We were able to actually include 6 juniors in that first pilot of the program this year. So rather than starting at the beginning of next year, we started at the beginning of this year. Those 6 juniors have gone through, they have completed, they've nearly completed the first year. Ohio State is going to help them get caught up with any work that they might need to complete by offering a summer session through the month of June. They're sending a professor to the Southwest Career Academy where kids will complete their coursework there. But this group of juniors is the first group that's going to go through. Completion of this program means a couple of things will happen. Students are going to be able to receive a national certification for being an interpreter, and they're going to be able to complete college career coursework or college career readiness coursework through Ohio State, where they're going to get dual credits at Southwestern City Schools and at Ohio State. And when they finish the program, the goal at Ohio State is to bring them in to University Hospital as medical interpreters. Now, Dr. Martinez, who's partnering with us on this, said he wants those kids coming in as interpreters. He wants them to use that experience they have or that training that they have. But Dr. Martinez always tells us we'll start with medical interpreters at University Hospital. His long-term goal is those kids someday run a wing of the hospital. He wants those kids enrolling at Ohio State. So we're doing an awful lot of work with Dr. Martinez and the folks through the Impact Grant. Those juniors will be working this spring and next fall at the Primary One Health Center on West Broad. It's the old Station 10 firehouse. It's housed there. But just a wonderful opportunity for our students and a wonderful program to be a part of. Because there's been such a groundswell of support behind this, we now have 18 students who are rising juniors who are in the process of being identified and selected by Ohio State to be a part of the program. And at the freshman level, we have more than 30 students who really want to be a part of the program. Those 6 juniors blazed the path for us this year. Those rising juniors will pick that up next year, and then the program really appears to be growing even more at the freshman level. So again, as far as working through things, our job is, I leave this up every time I do any kind of a presentation. We don't get to change the direction of the wind. We can adjust our sails to catch as much wind as we can, and that's what our department is trying to do as far as the OELPA piece is concerned and the many wonderful opportunities.